The Canadian government is concerned about increasing incidents of alleged racism against immigrants who are seeking opportunities in Canada, or rather seeking visas. And South Africa has been pointed out to have a problem for a number of years. And the country is looking at embarking on diversity training as well as anti-racism training. So what is that? Well, we speak now to Kevin Vuong, independent member of the Canadian Parliament, to tell us about this. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start with how the situation was brought to your attention, or what you have understood about it over the years.
Well, I represent a downtown Toronto riding, home to many immigrants, people from around the world. And I was getting these very alarming allegations from people with friends and family in South Africa who were missing weddings, who were missing funerals. And it seemed like they were facing these very long wait times, processing times well in excess of what people from other countries were facing. And so as I investigated further, there was a parliamentary report out of Canada in May of last year that noted, quote, subtle and overt racism within the immigration system. And unfortunately, there was a table dedicated to looking at Africa and the very high refusal rates. And that was the only continent, the only region with which that was called out. And I think if you look at that, and unfortunately this continuing pattern, it seems that people who are invited by Canadian officials on Canadian government letterhead aren't able to get visas. How do you reconcile that, right? And so I'm here in South Africa, in your incredible country, to be able to meet with our High Commissioner to try to get to the bottom of what's going on at the High Commission.
How did that meeting go?
So, you know, Dudu, I'll be honest, I was both really disappointed and quite concerned, because these are well-documented issues covered in Canadian media. And like you had said, anti-racism training has been rolled out around the world at Canadian visa offices. And yet, if you hear the High Commissioner, you'd think there are no issues or no problems at all. And I'm left wondering, has he not read the parliamentary report? Has he not heard about the article that was written just last month that specifically called out in the Globe and Mail, Canada's newspaper of record, about South Africa and the challenges being faced here? And for me, I think, like most Canadians, all Canadians, we are proud of our role in helping to contribute to the end of apartheid. I think people would be very alarmed to hear that there might be people perpetuating those same injustices in our name.
What should we understand about the South African context in particular? So when we take a look at the makeup of the High Commission's office, are they Canadian? Is the staff mainly Canadian, or is it a combination? And what do the statistics tell us in terms of the rates of declines, and who is being declined?
So my understanding of the High Commission here in South Africa is they have delegated authority to locally engaged staff. So they have hired local South Africans who can approve or refuse visas. Now, one of the questions that I had for the High Commissioner was, well, is your locally employed staff, are they representative of the diversity of South Africa and the country that they're in? And he said yes. And I was like, okay, that's great. But what wasn't clear, and the High Commissioner wouldn't convey, is it's not about the staff writ large. It's about the people who have the authority to say yes or no. Does that represent the diversity of this country? And, you know, I'm left wondering if it does or not, right? And one of the other things that stands out and that he pointed out to me was like, well, I have locally employed staff doing these diversity committee meetings. We have regular meetings. And I was like, that sounds great. How often are these meetings? Are you meeting quarterly? Are you meeting monthly? And then he was like, well, I'm not going to be interrogated. And I was like, but I thought there were no issues here. Surely the approach would be to really do a deep dive. Surely it would be transparency, and you'd be looking at the data. But again, the High Commissioner's response was, there's no problem. And I think if the Canadian government, and we have a new Minister of Immigration, I think if he's probably still getting briefed and informed on all the different things that's part of his ministry, I think if he was aware of these issues, I think he would be alarmed as well.
I think that's my next question. What's Canada's immigration policy?
Well, we're a multicultural country. We welcome immigration. There's a consensus among Canadians, and frankly, I'm a product of that. My parents were immigrants. They were actually refugees. And the Canadian dream still very much exists. In one generation, using my family as an example, we've gone from refugees to having one of their sons, me, serve in our nation's parliament. I think that's amazing. And I think that's something that so many people, including from South Africa, want to be a part of. But I think we need to be fair and just in evaluating people because it should be merit-based.
Are you fighting a losing battle? If this has been going on for years, more so in South Africa, it's not just the incoming minister that deals with this portfolio, but those who've been there before him. Has no one paid attention?
No, I think that's a good question. I think one of the big steps was when 12 of my colleagues on the Immigration Committee published that report. There were a number of recommendations in there, including greater action and focus on Africa, as well as looking at the data. I think steps are being taken that's moving in the right direction. I'm here to ensure that we continue to stay focused on addressing that, to call attention to it, because South Africa, you lent us, your brothers and sisters, to help us fight the worst wildfires in Canadian recorded history. We can't turn around as a country and burn the very ones that helped us to put out those fires. Right now, the High Commission does not seem to be living up to our standards as Canadians or our values.
Okay. We're going to attempt to get them onto the program, but just lastly, what's anti-racism training?
Well, I think helping people to understand what are their conscious and subconscious biases, helping to ensure that we put in place guardrails so that those don't make their way into what should be a merit-based process, and ensuring first and foremost, that people are treated fairly and justly.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Kevin Vuong, independent member of the Canadian Parliament.